My name's Sam. I am a nutritionist, I'm a chef, and I run a business called The Life Larder. The Life Larder is a community and newsletter focused on sharing ideas around healthy soil, healthy bodies, and a healthy world. So my focus really is people like you, people that kind of have either a passion for this or have a deep understanding, and taking those stories further. I also run the cooking school at the College of Naturopathic Medicine, and I spend a lot of my life trying to bring together this idea of what good food really looks like, but how we can ensure that people are able to eat it in a way that makes sense to them. I think a lot of the health food world can be quite kind of lofty. Add spirulina, do this. We don't need to do that stuff. We just need to be thinking about putting good food in. Before we delve into the conversation today, I'm just going to kind of set us up a little bit so you know where we're heading. And then I'm going to let these two wonderful women introduce themselves. So all of you here are aware that everything we eat is born from the soil. But day after day, I find the discussion in that well-being echo chamber is focused on the fork. Incredible food doesn't happen without incredible growers. There's so much power in the fields that I think a lot of the time consumers can't actually connect the dots because they just don't know. They don't know what's going on in spaces like this. We're seeing a race to measure nutrient density in regen, organic, and biodynamic foods versus intensively farmed ones. And I think this is really interesting because obviously the science is very helpful. The government need the science to prove, okay, we can do this. We know that we're going to get that higher level of nutrient density from regen. However, so many conversations here, and somebody yesterday saying we've kind of got that data now. There's so many people that are saying, well, look, we can taste it, we can smell it, we can feel it. We know that if the soil is in a better state, the food is going to be better. And therefore, we're not just getting those base level nutrients we need, we're getting the level of nutrition we need to be truly healthy. And I think this is something that we don't often think about. When we look at the Public Health England guidelines, they are basically a Netflix day. They are you not getting out of bed, what you need to just be sedentary. What we need to be optimum is very different. We've also got an ultra-processed food pandemic, and there's a couple of panels talking about ultra-processed food today. We are not going to do that, but we may kind of touch on it a little bit. I think it's important to say that almost 60% of UK adults' diets is ultra-processed, and that's up to 80% in children. We're also seeing clear links from ultra-processed food to conditions like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, cancer. I could go on. What's really interesting is this isn't just in adults now, this is also in children. So this is a real issue. In 2021, the World Health Organization published a study and it attributed almost 400,000 excess deaths just to ultra-processed food. That's not including alcohol. Alcohol's double that number. But why is this important? Why is this important for what we're going to talk about today? Well, if growers, chefs, and health professionals can collaborate more closely, then I think we can wield more power than big food. I think we have that potential. But I feel that we need to be talking about real food stories that are backed by science. That's going to prove to be way more powerful than generic advertising. But the only way we can do that is if we come together as an army and we're committed and we are all kind of facing the same way. So without further ado, I would love to pass over to my panel because we all come from different sides of this coin: growing, chefing, and healthcare. And I kind of want to bring that conversation together to hopefully share some ideas with you for how maybe you can take it forward into your lives. Sheila, I'm going to go to you first. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks, Sam. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming along this morning. My name is Sheila Das. I work for the Royal Horticultural Society at the RHS's flagship garden at Wisley in Surrey, which is a couple of 100 acres I have responsibility for our learning programs in the garden, growing edibles, our wellbeing garden and our seed scheme, so kind of all the nourishing and nurturing things, I like to think. And when Sam asked me to do this, I slightly felt a bit like, oof, gosh, I'm not sure I have much to bring to this. But actually, it is about, as Sam says, connecting the dots. So what we're doing at Wisley, we are obviously at the kind of public horticulture end of things. We're not big production horticulture, as many people here are. We are what is, I hate the term referred to as ornamental horticulture, which I actually happen to think is fundamental, not ornamental. At Wisley, we have 19 acres of edible growing space. We have the privilege and the luxury that we don't need that for our income and we don't need it for our sustenance. So we've embarked on a really exciting project to try and reimagine what that space could look like, what growing could look like, moving away from some of the conventions of the 50s and 60s largely in horticulture and pushing through much more to the themes that are here today. So that's why I'm here today. And I'm absolutely passionate / obsessed with this linking and connecting the dots and how actually it's all about the smallest parts of the system coming together to make big differences.
Thank you very much. And the wonderful Polly, who many of you may have eaten her food already, and if you haven't, it is wonderful.
Thank you very much. And I firstly apologise for my attire. I've just cooked breakfast and lunch for about 300 people. So, yeah, I'm Polly. I'm from the Jolly Allotment. I am the creator of what I know and believe to be the UK's most people and planet-friendly food truck. We are soil health and gut health is right at the core of our business because it saved my life. I had an autoimmune condition, post-viral fatigue. I was told I wouldn't live. I was told there was nothing in modern medicine that could cure me. And I met a really lovely doctor who took me for a bone broth and a vegetable soup and a veggie juice and said that everything that you need to heal is in those 2 plates of food. Food is either power or poison. You must choose wisely. And from that day on, I'd made it my absolute mission to know the people that grow, make, eat everything that I do. 4 years later, I'm sitting here today. I'm cooking in front of a big hot fire for all you, and I couldn't even walk back then. So it's my mission I'm a food activist. I'm a naturopathic chef. I believe in cooking on fire for the soul. And it's my mission to get people to really understand that how food makes you feel is how we are going to get people to change what they eat. And there's nothing that makes you feel more joyous than driving to your farmer on a Monday morning, getting your trailer very stuck in his field, but picking up beautiful herbs and spices and flowers to nourish a field full of lovely people like you. So that's what I do.
Thank you so much. Okay, so when we were kind of tabling this conversation, there were 4 key pillars that really fell out of what we wanted to explore. And we're going to speak about different questions that kind of fall into each of those. So we're going to start with this idea of challenge. What are those key challenges and the key challenges of understanding? Then we're going to move into connection. Then the idea of instinct, right? How we really feel, how we connect, but how we know that. And the last one, these are all quite heavy, right? We're like, food is joy. Really, we can sit there and we can count calories and nutrient density, and from my point of view, very sciencey, but food is about bringing people together. When we look at the blue zones, one of the key things that all of the blue zones talk about is the fact that getting people around the table, community, is that thing that kind of drives people. So we're going to kind of finish off with joy. So first question, what do you both feel nutrient-dense food actually means?
Oh, I'm going first. I think that's why I was reticent. I think that's a really, really hard thing to address, to answer, because it means something different to everybody. And so you've mentioned science, Sam, and that's one way of looking at it. Organised modern science can break down nutrients and be very factual about it. But somebody yesterday in a talk said we're overfed but undernourished. And certainly for me, on a personal level, as I've grown up and grown older, I've learned that food isn't just about the numbers, the thing on the back of the packet. It's about everything else that comes with it that helps me to feel nourished. I did have breakfast at Polly's this morning, and it was delicious, and I feel nourished and set up. And do you know that the biggest thing for me about doing that was knowing I could walk up there. I don't have to think about, I wonder what's in this. I wonder where it came from. Is my conscience clear from, was anybody harmed in the making of my breakfast? So I think nutrient dense, factually, scientifically, in that modern construct is one thing, and nourishment is another. And I think people are, on varying scales, probably at quite an ill-informed end of the scale on many of those things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. So our job is to feed people, and generally what we do is we make people full. That's not the same as feeding them at all. I'm in a really lucky, fortunate position that I didn't have a gut wall, and I was only taking in 1% of nutrient from anything that I ate. And if I ate a plate of food that wasn't organic or regenerative, that had chemicals near it, I wouldn't be able to function, get out of bed. If someone gave me an organic plate of food of exactly the same balance, it would give me energy. So I know, without anyone giving me a science paper, and you and I are quite a good team because you always go, I can back that up with some science. And I go, I know how it feels. But I can feel it. I literally, and basically what the food is doing, what the food that we're feeding from supermarkets, the highly processed food, it's taking us away from our human instinct, our basic primal human instinct about what is good for us. And we need the science, like we have to have the science, we have to have the numbers on the back of things. But for me, it's all about getting people to really feel into the food. I think we've outsourced our wellness to other people. Like we go to a doctor, we ask them for a pill, we ask them what's wrong with us. You know what's wrong with you, but we ask somebody else. And it's the same if you buy a diet book, and there's some beautiful diet books out there that have really helped me. But it's why I haven't written a book yet, because my book would be really good for me, okay? What we have to do is get people to think about what their body needs. So when you ask me what nutrients are, it's like a whole big can of lovely worms, because actually the simplest way, I teach all this in schools now. I go in every day and we teach fire cooking to schools in Carmarthenshire, and we talk about eating the rainbow. And we have to simplify the science. If we're going to reconnect people to what they're eating, to get them to eat more nutritious plates of food, we need to not be talking about calories, protein, carbohydrates, things as a dyslexic person I can't even read. We just need to, like every food that is a different colour has a different set of nutrient balance in it. See, when you have our beans, there's 3 different types of beans. They're 3 different colours. They all give you something else. So it's about eating the rainbow. And we always say, grow the rainbow, eat the rainbow, be the rainbow, because literally it's as simple as that. And I think what happens is we get bogged down in stats and science, and we do need it to be able to back up what I'm saying. But I think we're talking about connection. We have to find a way of simplifying it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think both of you have got really beautiful articulations of the point there. From my point of view, I always ask people, if I'm working with them one-to-one, to send me pictures of their plates. I don't want you to tell me what you ate. I want to see it, because then from that I can see how much is on your plate, and I can then see that level of nutrient density, right? Thinking about the amount of colours, the amount of maybe pulses you've got in there, beans versus having, maybe it's a big bowl of pasta with a little bit of tomato sauce and nothing else, right? It's very easy to spot nutrient density when you can see a plate versus somebody necessarily kind of listing things out for you.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because you start to digest with your eyes. So you start to, when you see something, your body starts to prepare itself for digestion. So if you're looking at a beige plate of food, you're like, you know, that's not exciting, is it? You know, whereas if you're looking at this colourful plate of food, you know it's going to nourish you. You know,
definitely.
So no, I'm going off on one, so
I'm going to move us on. How can chefs champion growers through their food? Are there any collaborations that you've seen that you think are really interesting that are kind of leading the charge on that? And I'm going to come to Sheila first.
Yeah, I think as I sort of mentioned, it's all about connecting the dots and that we're all a link in this chain, in this web, and we all have to communicate with each other. Being in Surrey, we're not far from Sussex, which is quite close to the NEP Wilding project, and they've obviously launched their, for anyone who doesn't know, a kitchen restaurant that's closely attached to their market garden. And there is a great collaboration going on there, and this kind of previous disconnect, and I might dare to say, and not get into trouble, we have experienced that with large caterers at Wisley, that we're trying really hard now to connect with those people who are making food on site. And talking to the growers at NEP and the head chef, and they're just in constant dialogue. But also it's experiential. So the chefs need to be in the garden, the gardeners need to be in the kitchen. And it's that kind of, you know, I will happily admit I'm no friend of the kitchen, and I'm rarely, you know, and I'd love to learn more about it and really understand that part of the process as a grower as well. So I think that connection is what is really important. And the reason I think we have a role to play in that, in terms of the ornamental horticulture world and public gardens, is that we're the people who can actually get people to touch plants, to grow plants, to learn about cooking and eating in the same way as we can do that with chefs. So it's constant dialogue, it's seeing what works, it's making kind of compromises. I think it might have been Andy Cato last night who used the phrase, it's progress, not perfection. So it's how do you kind of come and meet in the middle and find what's best for everybody, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I know loads of projects, but the ones that I see that work the best are things like the Long Table in Shroud, where they are doing the big community spaces where people cook and eat together, and they do guest chefing, and people are in conversation. And for us, the things that work the best is we do like a big community cook where we get people to come and they actually make what they're eating, and we always have the grower there. I think what made a change for me was actually getting my hands in the soil and actually growing. And it's amazing to me how many chefs are so disconnected from that. It's a massive problem.
I completely agree.
It's a massive problem. So I work for this really beautiful programme that we've been given a lot of money from Parliament it's called Cook 24 in Wales, and it's been campaigned for by a really beautiful man, Simon Wright from Wright's Food Emporium, and he's been campaigning for it for 6 years, and we've got till March to prove that connecting people and kids and chefs can help change things. And we do big chefs tables, and we all sit and we all cook a dish, and it really blows my mind that they know how to make it taste good, but they don't know why it's good or why it makes them feel good. And I think we've got to connect chefs to growers in a much more practical, dynamic way, so that then they can put that forward to their clients and their consumer and things like that. There's a lot of work to do there.
I think this kind of dovetails quite nicely. But whose job do you think it is to educate consumers on seasonality, on changes in our climate, and these things that are ultimately affecting the price and the yield of what we're able to get on our plates?
I definitely want to jump in first. I think it is people like the Royal Horticultural Society. We have a huge role to play with gardeners, with people who come to our gardens who aren't gardeners. There are 30 million gardens in the UK that represent something like over 500,000 hectares of land. So there's opportunity for people to get their hands in the soil. And I think, we often have a dialogue about, don't forget the people who don't have gardens. Well, it's something like only 12% actually of people don't have an outside space, which is not great for the 12% of people, but equally there's a huge number of people who do. So actually encouraging people to do that in an integrated way, and I referred earlier to not enjoying the term ornamental horticulture because it puts a separation between production and ornamental, and somehow never the two should meet, and they're these big different disparate forces that don't belong together. So actually showing people that you can have a beautiful garden space in your home garden that you can sit in and enjoy, but you can pick and eat it, you can graze your garden, you can have variety. It helps you understand the seasonality is one thing. I am absolutely adamant, and I have an amazing team working with me at Wisley, that we will now grow things that our site and our garden will allow us to grow. So this means that we have to... Somebody famous once said we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them. It means that we have to do what our site lets us do. Now, I've listening to some conversations here over the course of yesterday. It's quite interesting to me always that, let's say we're lamenting that we don't grow potatoes in this country, for example. There will be reasons for that, political ones, but let's say it was a growing one, let's say it's a conditions one, then it's like, well, why are we still pursuing the potato? Why aren't we pursuing the thing that works? So I think that's the narrative, and that's the story that we want to tell our visitors, whether it be that they're growing food or other things in their garden. Have what your site will let you do. Then you start to relinquish an element of control. And on a personal level, I love that. I absolutely love the fact that I'm no longer presented with such a wealth of choice of things that I could do in this landscape. The pressure is huge. When I started as a garden manager at the RHS, I thought, God, everyone's going to find out and I don't really know what I'm doing. But actually, if you say, I'm going to do what the site allows me to do, I'm going to read that and be instructed by nature, effectively, it changes your course of decisions. So let's change what we want to eat and when we want to eat it by being spoken to by a different energy and a different force that says, this is what you can grow. And I think if we can do that at a small scale, on a windowsill, in a pot outside the back door, on a balcony, in a garden, people will start to internalize that. And I will just share one brilliant story that a member of my team shared with me who was in the garden. There was a child in our food garden who was playing in one of the beds. And father said to him, don't know his name, but get out the beds, get out the dirt. And the kid turned around and went, it's not dirt, it's soil. So if you can internalize that, if that's what that's not dirt, that's special and it's magic. That's where it starts to happen. But it has to be children. If you're doing that with children, we do a lot of work with schools. We'll bring school groups in en masse because it ticks the box and does the numbers. But what's then happening when they go home to their families? And I was recently fortunate enough to be on a bit of a mega horticultural trip in the States, and we went to Phoenix in Arizona, growing a community project, growing in really challenging circumstances, bringing children in, effectively doing like a CSA box thing, but having children pick the veg boxes and take them home to their families. And these were children who were in quite difficult living situations in economically compromised places, and they were taking home the best organic produce. It wasn't the leftovers, it wasn't the waste, the stuff that we channel through our food banks. It was really good food, but they were taking that home. What I did at school today goes home to family and becomes internalized. So I think I've completely forgotten the question, but that's the way that we can help people to understand seasonality.
And I want to just jump in on the back of that. There was a conversation yesterday and it kind of focused also on, educating children, which is super important. But I think there is a huge gap where, yes, if we can send children home with organic fruits and veggies, then how do we empower their parents? And particularly, I'm from a single parent family in the north of England. We didn't grow up with much at all. I grew up on UPF. And my mum was just so busy working that she didn't have time to cook. I had to teach myself to cook. So I think there is this kind of like, we can send it home and then the parents will cook with it. There's then an education piece to do with the parents. It's how do we reach them? Sorry, I'm going to get on my soapbox now. this is where I think, yes, there's so much education we can do, but there needs to be a level of legislation as well. And this is where I think our government really have a part to play, because if we're going to reach people across the country, across all kind of social economic levels, it has to come from a place of kind of top down, right? Because we can't necessarily always do it from a grassroots point of view. Polly's going to disagree, which is good.
Yeah, I am going to disagree. So, whose job is it? Was the question, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's everybody's really, but
It's everybody's job. Exactly that. And no one sector can do it by themselves. It's about the connection. So the little pot of money that we've got, which I am going to say has come from Parliament, it's not.
But it's from the Welsh government, right?
No. Okay.
Okay, that's very interesting.
It's from Parliament, and instead of giving us this money and throwing this money out that would be a small stone in a big pond, they've given us it just for Carmarthenshire. So over the next year, we as a team of people have to prove how much money it's actually going to take to spread that out across country. So we're trying to give them a realistic figure about what it's going to take to reconnect the chef, the grower, and the education. Now, there's lots of things that we're doing, but my thing is that I get to go into schools, set up my fire in a playground, and cook beans and cheese with 8 to 10-year-olds and talk about everything that you guys do with your soil to make those beans taste better than what they get from Uber, okay? And the bigger thing is now is I ask kids what their favourite food is, and that's their answer, Uber. It's petrifying, but what's more petrifying, just to come back to your point, is that their teachers are really surprised by everything that we talk about. So there's this massive generation gap where the 1970s are responsible for a lot of things. And there's a huge generation gap of people. Like, this field that we're all in is really beautiful because we're all in this very narrow algorithm of joyous life, because we're going to save the world, and I really believe you all are. But there's a whole lot of other people that don't even know that the beans in the can that they get from the supermarket are nowhere near as nutritious as the ones that they can still make really affordably. So we have to find a way to get people to reconnect with what's good for them by giving them experiences. I can't go in and go, you need to eat this and you need to do that. You know, that's me and my very privileged soapbox. But if I can give them an experience, whether it's a trip to see my farmer and they can stroke the bull's ears because he's so well nourished, this bull that is just a genteel, and they really can have an experience. I think people are just so disconnected anyway. We've got to give them a feeling and give them an experience. And I say what's happening with us in schools is the kids are going home, and I'm in September doing the same workshop for their parents, because the parents have got so excited that their kids are excited about food, but they don't know what they're talking about. So there's a lot of work to do, but it is possible. And as much as I could sit up here and get really political, I won't, because actually they are doing some good things. Not
a little bit more would be nice, right? Just a tiny bit, but that's okay.
Not many, but some.
Sheila, why should growers ensure their practices prioritise soil health and nutrient density in their crops?
Yeah, it's interesting, I think, when you talk about growing food, and again, there are always conversations about food or wildlife or people, or they're seen as very separate boxes, aren't they? But they're all connected. And it isn't just about nutrient density for us, is it? And I think as I've come to learn more about how everything could potentially hang together and present solutions for many of the challenges we're facing with our own health, with the planet's health, it's about kind of prioritizing that for resilience and for long-termism. So, yes, nutrient density out of my food is important. Now, if I'm going to try and induce that artificially, there's going to be a cost that comes with that, probably to the environment. So we've got to start thinking of soil in particular as this complete system, and that not only growing that food in a more positive way can help our own health, it will create the biggest water butt you can imagine in the soil. It will help with drainage and flood management and all of the things that we know that soil can do. So that's why, when I was talking about nourishment versus nutrition, that's why for me, if I eat something and I know it's been grown in a way that has a bigger ripple effect, that isn't just about, is this going to be good for me? Because ultimately what's good for me is having somewhere to live on a planet that's not going to crash and burn. So how we can talk about nutrition in just the kind of refined sense of what's happening with me locally is always something that's puzzled me, really. So talking about soil and growing practices and then the wider kind of biodiverse situation in the whole system is all part of the conversation, I think, in terms of nutrition.
Yeah, and I was had the pleasure of hosting conversation with Dr. Jenny Goodman yesterday, and she has this beautiful line in her new book that we're not living longer, we're living sicker. And I think it's really interesting, we talk about what nutrient density is, what it really means. Actually, there's this kind of beautiful iteration that we want a planet that we can exist on, but we also want to be healthy for as long as possible. How do we do that? And I think we can only do that by connecting these dots and having these conversations. In my world, there's so much conversation around supplements, take this, do this. Actually, and I truly believe that if we are eating good quality, well-grown food, we only need supplementation if there is something really wrong in their body, if we're course correcting. For instance, we've had barely any sun this year. So yes, at that point, supplement with vitamin D, because it's really hard to get any vitamin D out of our food. But we need that sunlight, right? But in the majority, and then, we come into this, how do we get this good food to people? But that's a conversation for another day. Really, we should be able to get the majority of what we need from food that is kind of grown in harmony with the earth.
Could you just remember the question? So I don't go off on some random tangent.
Well, I actually had a different question for you, but do you want to answer this one?
No.
Okay.
Go with the question. I just need a question so I don't get lost.
So I think we know why you prioritise sourcing good quality, nutrient-dense food. But I'd really like you to share how you do it, because I think you have quite a unique way of working with your suppliers.
Yeah, this is actually a really interesting one. I've just moved from North Yorkshire, and when I got sick, I started to look for organic growers near me, and I started to grow my own food. And I had a really busy life before I got sick, and I'd only lived in my house for probably about a year, and so I started to order from Riverford, and then I noticed on the Riverford box that there was this label Newfield Organics. So I googled that. So it was 1.5 miles up the road from my house. So the vegetables had gone all the way to Norfolk to come back to me from just up the road, and I was like, and then I went up and I met a really beautiful lady called Rosemary, who had been organically farming on that piece of land for 50 years. And she was 84, and it was very wet and cold and windy, and she was still picking beetroot by her hands out of the ground. And I get really emotional when I think about that conversation, because it totally changed my total perspective about what goes into the food that we eat, and people just don't understand what it takes. So it's like we're doing a 20-mile supper at Timber Festival next week, all organic, all regen. It's been really wet up there. There's a lot of food that I can't get, and everybody's been asking me for my menu. So I spent a lot of time cultivating those relationships, knocking on doors, growers sending me away, and me going, no, can I come for a day? Can I come and work? Can I come and help? Can I come and just hang out? And teach me, tell me, I want to know. And getting to know the person that's planting the food. And I was lucky in one way because I had no choice. I had to find a way to survive, and that, but also that connection, that community also awoke something else in me. So it was like these little building blocks of like the connection and little light bulb moments and feelings. So we've been really lucky at the Jolly Allotment to work with some really amazing small growers. I have just moved house. I've moved nearer to Wales, near Chepstow, and literally I'm having to do this whole process again. And it's really hard because no one's got time, you know. No one's got time to stand and talk to me. And it literally isn't because they don't want to. It's like finding the time. But it's just persistence and kindness and baking a cake and taking them when you go and pick stuff up, and like getting your trailer stuck like I did in Middle Ground Growers on my way here because I drove up a lane that you really shouldn't be in with a trailer and a truck. And I met Hamish, who's been growing our herbs for a while, who I've been buying from a wholesaler, but now he's half an hour down the road. It's about getting boots on the ground. But what we generally do is we forge these relationships, and then I go to the farmer on a Monday and go, what did all the other people not take? What's left? What's wonky? What does the supermarket not want? Give it me. And then I'll make something with it. So we never really know what we're serving. We do a thing called the Buddha Bowl, and we do it because I can just make it up as I go along. So that's how I work. And it's a privileged thing to be able to do. I totally understand that not everybody can do that. But we have to find a way for me to be able to, anyone to be able to pick up a phone and have a conversation, even if you're not there, but just actually having a conversation with a person so that you can understand what goes into it, so then you can pass it on to your client.
And I think also helping people not be too shy to ask. Whenever I go into a restaurant, will ask, where did things come from, right? And people hate me, I know they do, because I've also got a nut allergy, so I'm that person. You don't want me in your restaurant. But I love it when on a menu, I can see where things have come from, right? Or even if they put at the bottom, the fish is line caught. Like there's just certain clues on menus, dayboat, those sort of small things that tell us a story. And I think in restaurants as chefs, whether you are kind of doing events or whether you have a kind of more bricks and mortar setup, there are those opportunities to provide clues. And I live in London. There are lots of, I was joking about this with a friend, there are lots of wine bars with small plates that are all very expensive. But some of them will tell you where the food's from and other ones won't, right? And you'll be paying the same price for a plate, but you can tell that difference knowing where things are from. So I think there is a really easy way to educate the consumer via menus as well. I'm going to move on to our next question. Sorry, just because I've got a couple and I'd like to get through them. And then we're going to throw out to audience questions. How can we empower the general consumer to choose food that is better grown and ultimately better for them and the soil's health?
That kind of links on from what you were just saying, I think, Sam, because actually I've got a real issue with choice. I don't want to have to choose. It's just this constant, let's make this choice or that choice. And like you've just been saying, if things have been put on a menu with good intention, with some effort to actually source, good produce, that then will start to become normal. And our need to make choices will reduce. So it won't be a case of, is this food good or bad? It will just be, is this food? Yes, it is, and I can eat it. And that's the dream, isn't it? You can just turn up and eat something and not have to make so many choices. I'm exhausted by choice. And the idea of then keying into that seasonality, it's been a wet season. So there's a couple of things, isn't there? Grow diversely. So what we know is that climate isn't changing, it's variable. Look at the temperature today compared to yesterday. It's just that it goes up and down and up and down. And if we don't have a variety of things, and accept that you're going to we've kind of focused on that maximum, productivity yield at whatever space you're in, from an allotment grower to a windowsill grower to a large scale grower. We have to maximize the yield. Every single thing has to succeed. Well, some things don't, and some things will or won't now. We have to just face up to that. Things are too variable. So in a wet year, what's the thing that I'm growing that will succeed? And that means that when the chef comes and says, right, what have you got? Okay, I wanted beetroot, but I haven't got that. I've got something else. Then I'll take something else, and then I'll do what I do with it. And then the consumer comes in and goes, what are you going to feed me today? So I think better choices are actually less choices for me. It would be really nice not to have to choose, to be having that call and response with what's working, what is our environment giving us at the moment. And again, that comes back to nourishment. That's nourishing because it's what works. Not, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a big supermarket who had cauliflowers on my spreadsheet for this week, and if the harvest is late, I'm not going to have them. That's just bullshit,
maybe there's
really,
something around honesty there as well from big supermarkets, because I think we get it in smaller shops. We particularly get it in farm shops where if the cauliflowers aren't available, they're not there, right? And if things are imported, they're at a higher price, whereas the supermarkets set their prices. There's variability and fluctuations, but not, it's more incremental and gradual, as opposed to 1 week it'll be, I don't know, there was a huge issue, wasn't there, in France, where everybody went crazy because lettuces were really expensive, and then they plummeted because, again, it was that availability. We have a completely different system in the UK in our supermarkets to on the continent, where that price variability, that's why it's a fairer market. That's why the tomatoes last year, we couldn't get them for love nor money unless you were buying them at a premium price. I think honesty as well is a good point.
But also, I think community comes in there. Sorry, just that kind of, the thing of, if you know someone with an allotment, then they'll run at you with an armful of courgettes every 5 minutes throughout the summer. But so I'm doing this a little bit in my own road. You sort of talk to your neighbours and go, oh, what are you growing? What are you growing? Oh, I'm growing a lot of these. You grow a lot of those. Hey, I can give you those. It kind of comes back to that, doesn't it? Of how we can share more. But that domestic growing, that small scale, at home growing is the thing that informs us definitely in being more tolerant and almost embracing the choice, the removal of choice, because we just okay, that's fine. That's what happens because I understand it.
Choice is the biggest problem we've got. One of the biggest problems we got. It's a little bit like sustainable is not sustainable anymore. People wanting choice, chefs wanting to choose 3 weeks in advance, but it's on all levels. Like, we get asked by the consumer for something that I don't know what I'm going to have, because I don't know if my farmer can grow it, because I don't know what the weather's going to be. But we need to get the consumer to understand that process, because if I can't supply cauliflower at a private party where I've promised them whole cauliflowers on the table, I then get this, I'm then out of contract with them, and I have to have these big, difficult conversations, because most people would probably just go to Tesco's and get a cauliflower. But I'm like, my farmer doesn't have cauliflower, but what he really does have is this, and I'm going to make it super delicious. And, but chefs need to take responsibility for that. They have to have smaller menus. People need to be prepared to go into a restaurant and not be given such a wide choice, and just trust I
think trust is the right word.
And I rely on that, but you'll hear me shouting from the back kitchen at the trolley, telling people where everything comes from and what they should, maybe try if they've got a hangover or whatever. But I think there's stuff to do on all levels. We have to, as people, start taking responsibility for our own well-being as well as our own choices. by getting people to be okay with less choice. I mean, don't get me on the choice of milk thing. No, we won't go there. If anybody wants to hear my absolutely on point rant about what milk you would like in your coffee in the morning, please do come see me at the trailer. I did it at 6 o'clock this morning and someone said, it's really good, but it's too early. So I'll let you move on.
Right, well, actually, we're going to throw out to questions now. So I see there's a hand over here. There's a lovely roving mic.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Right, I'm a broadacre farmer, arable farmer and grower. We're trying to do regenerative farming like many people. I'm also a Zoe nutrition participant for about a year. And I'm growing increasingly concerned about the disconnect all the way through our society about what food is. And well done for you having, I think, about the only talk here talking about food as nutrition.
Thank you.
Okay, now, when we look at food and we talk about it, you look at everything here, it's all about diversity of biology. That is where our health comes from. That is where the health of our environment comes from. And the issues that we're having today are about our disconnect with biology. Okay, so that's a fundamental thing. I'd like to ask the people here, how many people here are actually farmers? You show us hands? Okay.
I'm glad you asked that. Can we follow that with who's a chef? And who works in the medical sphere? Okay, so we're mainly farmers. Thank you.
Could I ask also, who here is a major processor, food processor? A major processor. Who here is a major food retailer? You are. Okay. So I think that explains a lot of it. So I listened to Unilever's point of view and M&S's point of view yesterday, and they were talking about carbon. And when I analysed that actually, to the farming conversation, is about money. When I look at the process of being a farmer, it's actually about money. And when I look at the process of processing food and retailing food, it's about money. So what we have got in this country, and supported by people's lifestyles, food on the go, not got any time to grow stuff, produce stuff.
I agree with your points. Can you move to the question, just because I would love to give somebody else one as well.
It's until we get to the point where we all connect with this and we fully understand that these people, this is food in this country is an industrialised commodity. What I grow on my farm is treated as a commodity, and we don't see it as nutrition. So not so much a question as a statement and a plea to everybody to understand that it's a biological product, not a commodity. My personal rant, sorry.
Thank you.
I'm just going to come back on that. So I think what we all need to do is a simple thing that you can do. We need to basically, we need to, instead of taxing big businesses and giving them tax breaks for planting trees, we need to give them tax breaks for supporting grassroots food programs, growing and farmers, because soil captures more carbon than planting trees anyway. It's a big greenwashing project, right? So actually, if everyone wrote to their MPs and got them to lobby that, then that is a way that we can make change, because yes, we do need money, and we need money from the top.
We've got a question down here. Thank you. I know that we're running shy on time. I'd like to come back on that, but we won't.
I'll be quick.
Thank you.
Everything's solved by short, localised supply chains and localised production and the building of community. Everything. Nothing will be fixed by big companies and big processors whose first concern is to satisfy their shareholders with dividends. It won't happen. It's in the community. I get where you're going, but we can build it small and we can do it more ethically. We can then scale up.
I don't agree, actually. I do agree, but the money has got to come from those big businesses. because otherwise you can't send it out from everywhere. So what we've got to do as small communities is to prove that it works, and then we've got to get bigger businesses to invest. But that also has to come with legislation so that those big businesses then don't just turn that into the same system again. And it is a massive problem, but you cannot just preach to this field, because everybody in this room understands what we're talking about. And if you're not talking to big business, you're not changing anything. End of.
I do really love your point, though. It is these little clusters, and I think COVID was almost, an incredible case study for allowing people to go back to getting food locally. It was really interesting. And how many of you still use the suppliers that you used during COVID? Those smaller businesses that maybe you could go and get something, but it also evolved a lot of small businesses as well. They were able to then kind of perhaps make more money by selling different things. So, yeah.
Can I just add as well? Okay, Polly, you're everything a chef should be. I'm a bit fed up with smears, foams, tasting menus. You're everything a chef should be. Thank you.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you.
I'm going to take one more. Can I go down to Darina? Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Morning, and thank you. Doctors have virtually no, in their training, they have virtually no training on nutrition, and that is one of the big problems. But chefs in their training, not all chefs go through chef schools, but I'm just wondering if they have any training at all, if they ever go out onto farms and see how things grow even. And actually, I just wonder, in this room, apart from the people who grow them, how many people know how long it takes to grow a bunch of carrots or a bunch of beets? Let's ask. Oh yeah. Well, look, tell us so. Tell us. How long? Yeah. Sorry, yeah, yes, sure, you're right. Yeah, well, that's terrific. We've got quite an enlightened thing. It takes at least 3 months, more likely 4 months to grow. And then, with things like if the chefs come out onto the farms, they can see with beets, you don't have just one crop. You have the beets, you have the stalks, which are delicious when they're cooked and then tossed in a lot of oil.
And the leaves.
And you have the leaves. And so on. But if I went for one moment, I just wanted to illustrate this with a little point. A number of years ago, I come from Ireland, and we used to do a literary festival of food and wine, and the chefs, cooking dinners and all sorts of things, and they wanted to come down to the greenhouse to get some flowers for the whatever. So anyway, busy, go down and pick them yourself. Oh my God, disaster. Because basically one chef wanted lots of broad bean flowers and practically took all the broad bean flowers off the broad beans. And absolutely, Timmy was devastated. He said, "That's my crop." And he said, "What do you mean? I just took the flowers." Hello? The flowers turn into the beans. But I mean, that just illustrates, and I could go on and on. But I just also say to my students, when they come, when you're here for 3 months with us on a farm and thing, just get super curious. When you go anywhere you walk, go and look around and say, do I know the name of that tree? Do I know the name of that weed? Do I know the name of that plant? It makes life so much more exciting, and not to speak of the vegetables and things. Sorry, that was a statement at the end of a question. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everybody that's joined us. We are at the hour, 5 to the hour.